Thank you very much, Ivan, for that warm welcome. I'm quite humbled. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so yes, today I'm going to talk about Diversity Atlas, and I'm going to talk about diversity, and I'm going to try to unpack what we mean by diversity. And before I do that, I just want to remind for those of you who haven't completed the survey, I've got about 10 or 11 people so far that have completed it. It'd be great to get a few more people to do it. The data gets inputted live. So as I'm talking, you might want to just copy the link that's in the chat and fill out the survey. There is a forced anonymity in this survey, so there's no issue with finding out who's filling out what. Okay, so I'm just going to start off maybe with this first slide here. Today, diversity is at the forefront of everyone's minds. Everyone's talking about diversity, including customers, and the value that it brings to organizations and what it means not only for social justice, but what it can mean for making organizations more representative, more profitable, more innovative, and so forth. Some of the companies that we're talking to are telling us that full transparency is being expected of them today. It is so easy for customers to take their businesses anywhere they want to in the world today. So more than ever, organizations, businesses, governments need to really be paying attention to our diversity. I'm describing this decade as the decisive decade, decade where transparency on a whole range of issues, if it's not being provided, will have lasting impact on societies. Okay, so everyone's talking about diversity at the moment, like I said, and there's a myriad of studies out there that talk about the benefits that diversity can bring to organizations. Some of the major organizations that we're talking to, such as Telstra and energy companies and mineral companies, they're saying, yep, all these reports are great, but what does it actually mean for us? What happens when you create a more diverse, complete workforce in your own organization? I think if you're a police force, or if you're a hospital, or if you're a bank, the value proposition is going to vary considerably for all these different types of organizations. So today, taking a data-driven approach towards making organizations more equitable, inclusive, and representative is more important than ever. Until recently, diversity as a concept had been poorly defined, analytically neglected, and in need of robust understanding. So how does an organization know what diversity it has? What is it that you're actually measuring? And how are you going to actually do this? At the moment, diversity is being loosely approached from probably a gender and an accessibility perspective. However, a whole myriad of other dimensions are being ignored. So until you start to break down what diversity is, you're never really going to know who you are, and you're never really going to be able to work towards that, inclusivity, that equity that you want to achieve, that representation that you want to achieve. Just recently, we had the Australian census, and a lot of people were feeling not included in the Australian census. So part of what we're trying to do with Diversity Atlas is develop inclusive data sets. We're trying to democratize this notion of diversity by making sure that no one is being left out. Now, this is a problem all over the world, actually. In France in 1978, they developed laws around, identity, and you weren't allowed to ask questions around certain aspects of people's identity. And now that's created all these invisible minority groups. So when Europe now is trying to develop these anti-racism action strategies, they can't do that. In the US and in the UK, they conflate these notions of race and ethnicity, and they have these broad categories. So consequently, a lot of people are being left out. Now, it's not just cultural diversity, it's a whole range of other different dimensions of diversity as well. So there's so many studies that have been done, and we've started to develop value propositions for a whole range of different sectors. But I think the one on the top right is probably the one that really stuck out for me the very first time I saw this. And the statistics actually vary all the way up to 90%. So 70 to 90% of organized mergers and acquisitions actually fail across the globe. So think of why are they failing? Start to think of, how can you improve workforce engagement? How can you start to have workforces that can start to be more reflective of the communities that they're operating in? So they're just some of the outcomes, and I've only got 20 minutes today, and I didn't want to log into the dashboard, so I could probably spend 20 minutes just on that PowerPoint alone. So what did we do with our organization? So I've been working in this space of diversity. My motto is building global harmony through intercultural action. Back in 2015, my CTO came to me and he said, you always go on about diversity. I can help you measure it. I've got a mathematics background. And I said, yep, let's go ahead. We've got a few wins at the moment. We put a team together of subject matter experts, representing, ethnographers, anthropologists, organizational psychologists, mathematicians, computer, engineers, and we came up with Diversity Atlas. We conducted over 300 literature reviews, and what we've developed in the process too, and I've been working on this for about 30 years, is developing huge data sets to ensure that no one's left out. And I'm going to talk about those in a moment. And we've got this survey that we've been able to develop after so many focus groups and testing, where within a few minutes, we can get your data. And we can populate it into these dashboards and provide, these incredible insights into who an organization is. So a little bit about, the pillars that underpin our Diversity Atlas platform. So we have, 4 pillars around cultural diversity. So we disaggregated this notion of cultural diversity into worldview or religion. So whether, you subscribe to one of the 8,500 religions or their sub-branches, or whether you don't, whether you might be an atheist or a humanist or sub-branches of those, worldviews that try to make sense of all living things around us. We have a database of, we use the UN database of countries, the dependent territories, and we've extended that a little bit to include a few more countries into that. We have a database of 9,500 languages and speech communities across the globe. So in Australia, we have a database of more than 700 First Nations languages and speech communities that were spoken here beforehand. And we're now having a lot of people who are completing the survey in Australia, and they're saying this is the first time, my tribe and my language is actually I've ever found within a survey. And then we have about 8,000 ancestral heritages, cultural cultures, geocultures that ensure that people's cultural identity is being picked up. Then we have a whole range of other questions that we ask around, different demographics, age, gender, position type, position level. We ask questions around, personal attributes, gender, what someone's gender orientation might be, or gender expression, their biological sex. And then we have these internal and these sort of external measurements, which allow us to look at an organization internally and how it compares, one department compares to the next. And I'll talk a little bit about the metrics of why we do that. And then there's an external measurement, which is looking at yourself, at your organization, and how you might compare to your community. So, for example, if you were working in a community where there was 5% of the population's identified as maybe First Nations, then how can you ensure that you've at least got a workforce that can be reflective to that? And if you don't, then how can you develop a strategy over a period of time? And how can you take this sort of quantifiable approach where you're benchmarking how you're doing every single year? Okay, so so these are the scientific methodology, and these are basically the pillars. And I've just spoken about the different pillars. And if there's any questions you wanted to ask me around how we came up with these data sets, and how we're constantly developing them. It's like any bit of science. It's been democratized, and as we're using it, people are coming to us and saying, "Well, no, it's not spout like this. You don't have my religion in there. Can you include it in there?" So our anthropologists or our linguists will then take that on board, and then we'll add it into the database. So we've gone way beyond a Lingusphere and Ethnologue and all these other databases out there which have been put together by academics, but really real live inputs that are allowing us to improve what we're doing and making sure that no one's being left out. I want to talk about diversity. So and from a scientific perspective, and what does it actually mean? Really, it just simply means difference. So there's 3 metrics that we've come up, and this can be applied to anything. It's not just cultural diversity, it can be applied to almost every dimension of diversity. So the 3 metrics are variety, balance, and distance. So if we looked at the first one, let's say those 2 circles represented Italian speaking people, and the triangles represented people from, let's say, French. Then in the bottom, let's say we had Italian, French, Portuguese, and Spanish. We've got greater variety there. So we can actually develop an algorithm for that. So we do have algorithms that sit in the back end of our tool. Then balance is looking at the distribution of what we're trying to measure across an organization. And the Australian Human Rights Commission recently came up with a report which showed that 97% of people from the top 200 companies in Australia were of a Northern European background. So it wasn't at all reflective of the entire community. So it's really important that when we start to look at diversity, we look at what that distribution looks like. Is it just, all the people who work in the finance come from the Horn of Africa, or, all the cleaners are going to be basically just all from, South Asia, and the further north we go, is it just all men, and is it just all men from one particular part of the world? And distance is looking at the dissimilarity of what we're trying to measure. This is really important when it comes to cultural diversity, because someone's ethno-linguistic background shapes cognitive processes, shapes values, shapes empathy, and so on. So that second group that I was talking about, that Italian, French, Spanish, and Portuguese, now I think you'll think of another group where you might have an Italian, Japanese, Arabic, and Swahili, speaking person. The distance in that second group is going to be much greater. And we can start to take a measurement approach to that. We're still at the early stages of that. We still think it's going to be about 10 years away before we can do it, but there is a whole lot of data that's being developed around looking at the distance of those languages. And we actually start to categorize, we're starting to categorize all those languages in terms of their, how one differs from another. Okay, the last slide that I want to talk about before I log into the tool is representation or mutuality. We did a bit of work with Health West, and the workforce mutuality standards basically look at to what extent is your organization representative of the community you're working in. And the genesis for this idea was one of the laws of requisite variety, which is the principle of thermodynamics, which basically states that any system, if it's not as equally as varied as the environment it operates in, will eventually disappear or create tension. Okay, so now it's time for me to log in. So I think I need to stop sharing, and then I need to share again. And I'm going to log into my platform and show you the okay, so let me log in. Hopefully there's been a few more of you that have completed the survey. Oh, geez, 10 minutes ago, there was only 10. There's 24 now. That's a big improvement. Thank you very much, everyone. So here we have the Diversity Atlas platform. This is what it looks like. So I've only got a few minutes left, so I'm going to just give you a quick whistle-stop tour. Okay, so here we have the overview dashboard, and here we can see very, very quickly. One sec. We've got heat maps. Sorry. Okay. So basically, we've got a heat map, and we can see where people have come from. So we've got 3 people here from South Africa. We have some people here from South Asia, from India, and we have 16 people here from Australia. Then we've also got a few people from Canada. Over here, we've got a gender breakdown. So if we just wanted to look at, let's say, what the gender breakdown is of just women in terms of age, gender against age, we can sort of quickly get a sense of, there's a bit of a dip there between 36 and 46. What is the reason for that? And it's really interesting because we often find there's a dip between around 30 and 40, 45 for women. But we can look at so that's all. I'm sorry, I'm just looking at women. So let me get rid of all. But this is the gender versus age for females in an organization. And so there you can see there's a real dip between 35 and 40. What are the reasons for it? There's a diversity rating of 61%, which is extremely high. Usually, and the smaller an organization, the higher it is, but this sort of just gives us an indication of, it's a reference point. It's not, we're not trying to make a value statement here. It's about organizations being able to sort of track how they're doing over time. So I'm just going to move into some of the other panels, and I'm going to look at, let's say, languages, for example. So we want to see languages that are spoken by the group. Here we can look at the languages by trees. So we can start to see, okay, we've got some Semitic languages that are spoken here. We can look at languages spoken by zone. Let me go back to with the top 5 languages that are being spoken in the group. Over here, we've got lists of who's speaking what languages. And let me just go to languages rather than zones, but we can look at them through macro zones. So there's many different ways we can look at the languages. So this is how we've started to structure the languages. I'm going to move on to the compare function.
A bit of 3 minutes, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure, no problem. I'm just racing ahead really quickly. Thank you. And here I'm just, this is the compare function. So if I wanted to look at DBG forum, what the diversity is, and I wanted to compare it where there's no department. So if I wanted to compare it externally, I could look at DBG, the DEI forum today, and compare it to, let's say, what does it compare like to statistics? Now, we don't have enough stats in there to really make a full comparison, but generally, when we've got enough data, we can compare one department to the next. And then on the bottom here, there's different types of mutuality, allows us to look at the mutuality graph. So this is just a sort of a quick overview of the Diversity Atlas platform. And when we're talking about diversity, I think it's really important that we taking a deep intersectional approach. So whether you're looking at it through disability, you're looking at disability through not only through the disability lens, but how it applies to cultural diversity, how it applies to age, how it applies to balance within an organization. And on this final note, I just want to say that I talked about the decisive decade that we're living in. We can all be doing something, and I know Ivan's been doing some incredible work, which he's going to be talking about at a later forum, and that's how we all have a role to play, and even at a very micro level. I was reading the other day something like $1.25 quadrillion is spent on just money circulating in the economy on a global basis, and a lot of that is credit card transactions. And the future is going to the time will come where we can all start to direct, value where we want to. Thank you very much.